What is up, dudes? Lady dudes, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today, I'm doing another Let's Talk About video, or Where Does This Deck Stand Now video that I haven't done in a while, because I haven't really had a ton of archetypes I wanted to really talk about, and I finally have a couple, and I might do a couple more after this, of archetypes that I do want to talk about because they have caught my eye a little bit. And today I'm doing UAs, the archetype based around I guess athletes of a bunch of variety of different sports. UA also stands for Ultra Athletes, by the way. And yeah, it's a really cool archetype. It's a TCG exclusive archetype that is by no means good. I don't think it's terrible though, and you'll see when we look at some of the cards that the archetype has potential. Really does, and I really believe that, and I would love to see it shine a little bit, but we won't really see that until Konami really gives them support. But anyway, I do want to talk about what they can't do now because I don't think it's terrible. I think it's more of just a very rogue deck, or more of just a casual deck right now, but I do think it has potential, and we'll get there. So pretty much we're going to go through the main cards of the deck, talk about what they do, how the strategy works as a whole, and then talk about strengths, weaknesses, and if Konami was to give them support, what kind of support or what area of them I would like to see supported to kind of help them get there. But anyway, let's start with the cards. So let's get into the main monsters of the deck. This is the main card of the deck. Without this card, the deck does not play. UA midfielder. So essentially, he's the only level 4 or lower monsters. He's the only one you can normal summon without a tribute. And he's pretty good. I mean, his effects don't actually do a ton. He does have a nice effect that does come up definitely, which says if he's on the field on either player's turn, you can just target one other UA monster you control. You can bounce it back to your hand and then special summon a different UA monster with a different name from your hand as well. So you just kind of swap two, but he can't swap himself, unfortunately. That would be a really awesome dodge effect for himself because he is the one that you want to keep either in your hand or on your field at all times. But still, he's pretty good. And it's just important that he is the only one that's normal summonable. If you can help it, he will be your normal summon every time. So pretty much how this archetype works is that your monsters just swap for each other. Outside of UA midfielder, because I don't believe he has that original effect, yeah? Oh no, he does. He has the same effect where he says pretty much once per turn, you can special summon him from your hand by returning a UA monster you control to the hand except himself. So you just bounce one to your hand, special him out. And all of them have that effect, even the bigger ones. So I guess the main goal is normal summon midfielder. If you have another one in your hand, you just bounce midfielder to get the big one on board. And you do a bunch of swapping. You have more offensive Ultra Athletes, and you have more defensive Ultra Athletes, and you just kind of keep swapping them back and forth depending on the situation you're in. So Perfect Ace is probably your best defensive one. He has that same swap effect we just talked about, but his other effect on the field is that once per turn during your opponent's turn, when a card or effect is activated, you can discard a card to negate the activation and destroy it. Negate and destroy, pretty powerful. Any card. Any card or effect, which is pretty cool at the cost of just discarding a card. Obviously, discarding is whatever, but that's a pretty strong disruption, and if you can help it, you're going to summon him in defense modes. He's a 2500 booty, pretty good card. He's your main defensive one. If you're going to set up negates, it's going to be through him usually. Your other main defensive one is Blockbacker here. Again, lower attack, higher defense, 2700, pretty big, same swap effect. And his other effect says once per turn when your opponent special summons a monster or monsters, keep in mind for pendulum summons, you can change their battle positions, and if you do, negate their effects. Keep in mind the effect negation is permanent. Obviously this isn't as good against link monsters, but I think this card definitely still has value, for sure. Especially because with midfielder, you can negate something with Perfect Ace and then use midfielder's effect, quick effect from hand or on the field to bounce Perfect Ace back and then special Blockbacker out. So you literally would negate something, uses one negate per turn, and then bounce Blockbacker out. Hold on. Wow. Okay. So actually, Perfect Ace's second effect isn't actually a once per turn either. So, oh no, it is. Yeah. Okay. My bad. It is a once per turn. So you would use it, then you would use midfielder, bounce him back into Blockbacker, and you have another disruption after that, and they're both really big as well. So Blockbacker there. Then we have a few of the more offensive ones. So we have Mighty Slugger here. He pretty much says when he attacks, your opponent can't activate anything. until the end of the damage step. So certain decks this is good against, like you stop certain Salamangrates from floating, like your opponent can't use Gazelle from hand if you destroy a Salamangrate card. I don't believe they can use a Balinx Engrave to protect, and a couple other things as well. So that's pretty good. As well as like against strikers, like Ray wouldn't be able to activate because that's still in the damage step. So yeah, it definitely has a little bit of value. Thunder Dragons as well, I don't believe can protect either. So against all three of the best decks, actually has some pretty solid value. He's a little small for like Thunder Dragons, but for the other two decks, he definitely could be really, really solid. Another one of my favorites is Dreadnought Dunker. He's really offensive, and I frippin' love it. I said frippin', I didn't mean to, but I did. Whatever. So pretty much the way he works is that he deals piercing damage, so he's 2,500, pretty big. If he attacks a monster in defense position, he deals piercing to your opponent's life points, but his second effect is what's key. If he deals life point damage, period, inflicts battle damage, period, he can target one card on the field and destroy it. That is, target any card on the field and just pop it, which is really awesome. We'll see another card on here that really raises the ceiling of this card, but a lot of times, if your opponent can't disrupt him in the battle phase or keep him from getting to battle phase, he's taken 2 cards from him, which is really, really solid. All right. Then we move to the final, like, relevant one, semi-relevant one, is Rival Rebounder. Really balanced stats, 22, 23, pretty solid there. But he says if he's normal summoned or special summoned during your opponent's turn, you can target, or does it target? No, it doesn't target, but you special summon one UA monster from your hand or graveyard except for himself. So if you use like midfielder's effect from hand to special summon him on your opponent's turn, you can just drop another one, put extra bodies on board. Or if you do tribute summon him, so normal summon him that way, he will get you an extra special as well. So he's pretty cool. He's maybe a one of, he comes up a little bit, but fine. He's usable. There are 2 others. They're not really relevant. We won't talk about those. Then we get to some of the spells. So the UA Stadium is your field spell. It's really solid, but the biggest problem is you only have the one normal summonable monster. Because this card says if a UA monster is normal summoned to your side of the field, you can add one UA monster from your deck to your hand. So opening this in midfielder is literally just normal midfielder, search a big boy, swap the big boy immediately, and you're kind of set up a little bit. Also, once per turn, if a UA monster is special summoned to your side of field, all monsters you currently control gain 500 attack, even if this card leaves the field. That's a permanent attack gain, which is kind of nice, because if you set up a situation where you just have midfielder and he's swapping the other ones, then midfielder will continuously gain 500, 500, 500. If he gains 500 twice, he's already at 2,200. That's pretty big for certain decks to try and deal with, and then if the duel goes on long enough, he gets up to 35, 37, or 30, or not 35, 32, 3,700, and then he's a legitimate threat himself, which is pretty cool. But yeah, Stadium's pretty good. Probably the best card in the deck, period, is UA Signing Deal. So the way this card works is you just special summon a UA monster straight from your deck. Its effects are negated. Also, it cannot be used as Synchro or Xyz material for a summon. Then you lose life points equal to 300 times the level of the monster. You're almost always going into midfielder unless you already have midfielder, so you're paying 1,200, but totally worth with something that strong. It's a once per turn, obviously, but it's really, really powerful. Sometimes you literally just dump out one of the big boys, like Rebounder, and just like 2,500 beat stick for free. It's really solid, honestly. This card's actually like really, really good, and this is one of the cards that gives me really high hopes for the possible future of this deck. There's a little more complicated of a card here. So UA Turnover Tactics pretty much says that you control 2 or more UA monsters, shuffle all monsters on the field into the deck, then you special summon UA monsters from your deck equal to the number that you had originally on the field. So let's say you had 2, you just special summon 2 monsters from your deck with different names from each other, but they cannot attack this turn. Keep that in mind, so you can't just do battle phase shenanigans. Then your opponent can special summon monsters from their deck up to the number of cards shuffled into their main deck. Main deck specifically, keep that in mind, because if I use this on Thunder Dragons, you win the duel because you're shuffling back a bunch of monsters from the extra deck into the extra deck, and because none of them got shuffled back into the main deck, they don't get to special anything in return. And they just lose from there probably, because if you're using this assuming they use like negates or whatever, and then they just lose their whole board and lose. which is pretty cool. So this is a card that has like a really high ceiling in the right matchup. Maybe it's a side deck card. It is a little bit searchable. Keep it in mind. This card is just insanely powerful against certain matchups. Another really strong card that I really like is UA Powered Jersey. This card only equips to a UA monster. It gives them a 1,000 boost to their stats. If it battles a monster, any damage it inflicts is doubled. And also, if the equipped monster destroys a monster by its attack, it can make a second attack during this battle phase. Also, during the standby phase, banish the equipped monster. That doesn't really happen because of this. If this card is sent to the graveyard because the equipped monster returned to the hand, you can return this card to your hand as well. So you just load it back in your hand for next turn. So you literally like equip this, go into battle phase, bounce your monster to swap, and then just get this card back too, and do the same thing again next turn. This card combined with Dreadnought Dunker is insane. Think about it. Dreadnought Dunker already does piercing, so he gets the 1,000 boost. He does piercing, plus he does double damage. So so you attack over something, deal damage, double damage, then Dreadnought Dunker pops something because he destroyed a monster by battle, or dealt battle damage, sorry. Then this card gives you an additional attack again for another double damage, and then you get to pop something again. So this card plus Dreadnought Dunker probably removes straight up 4 cards from your opponent's field, which is insane. The second attack doesn't have to attack a monster specifically. You can just attack directly for double damage and probably just win the duel. This card's actually insane. There. Then another super, really good generic card in this deck is Foolish Burial Goods. We'll see in a minute. Just remember it here. I'll come back to it though. UA Penalty Box is the one trap this deck has access to, and it's really solid. So its actual trap effect or on the field effects are continuous, so it stays up. Says at the start of the damage step, if your UA monster battles an opponent's monster, you can banish that opponent's monster until the end of your opponent's second turn, or your opponent's second end phase from now. It is actually pretty far. So in hockey, usually if you get put in the penalty box, it's usually for 2 minutes at a time. So this is like 2 turns for your opponent. Makes sense. But the main effect for this card, the more important effect for at least the engine of this deck, says you can banish this card from your graveyard to add 1 UA spell card from your deck to your hand. So you literally just Foolish Burial Goods this to graveyard, then banish this to add Signing Deal, and then Signing Deal can just like turbo midfielder right out of the deck. So this is one of those. So that's what makes that's how you have 10 ways. 10 ways to get to midfielder. So you have 3 midfielder himself, 1 Rhoda, because everything is warrior, so you can use Rhoda in this deck, which is really nice. 3 Foolish Burial Goods to search, or to send this, then banish this to get Signing Deal, and then 3 Signing Deals. So you literally have 10 starter cards to get you to midfielder. The problem is 7 of them are ashable. Ash being the most common hand trap in the TCG makes that a problem, because if you don't open midfielder the hard way, like just hard open it, and you have to use these are all ashable. If your opponent decides to ash these, you probably just lose without midfielder. That's the biggest flaw for the deck right now. One more thing though, the only real relevant extra deck monster right now for the deck is Isolde. It's nothing crazy. You don't even play equips for it, but I guess there can be certain situations where literally just linking into this to add like a midfielder to hand can like save you. But this is just generic warrior support, and there's nothing really outside this. Maybe Mrs. Radiant because they're all Earths, I believe. But yeah, that's pretty much all the relevant cards for UAs. Now let's talk about how the deck works. I mean, we talked about it mostly, like you're just swapping the UAs back and forth. You have your offensive one, your defensive ones, and you just switch them depending on the situation. UA midfielder is your centerpiece. The spells are really nice kind of support cards. You have like decent removal, decent like power buffs with Jersey. You have just cards that help you just plus out the wazoo, like UA Stadium every turn. And you have a card like Penalty Box to slow your opponent down monster-wise, and also to extend, like even if your opponent outs it because they have too much trouble working around it in the battle phase, you just get a free search off of it. Like, thanks, man. And yeah, that's pretty much how the deck works. The biggest flaw for the deck is consistency by far. Like we just talked about, 10 ways, so you pretty much only get to play the game if you open one of the 10 cards. That's a decent chance to open and be able to play, but it's no guarantee, and especially when 7 of them are ashable. It almost forces you to play like Called by the Grave as like an extra little insurance policy to help you get that stuff off, but that takes away from possible draw power. You can't play Extravagance of the deck, which is really nice because you don't really use the extra deck, so that's really nice draw power the deck has access to. And we've seen it with other decks with Blue Eyes, with Dark Magician over the years, that you do kind of have to play a decent number of the bigger brick monsters that if you don't see midfielder with it, they will clog you up. So you play like 2 or 3 Perfect Ace, 1 Blockbacker, 1 Slugger, probably 2 Dunker, and 1 Rebounder. So you're looking at 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You're looking at like between 6 and 8, just like big kind of bricks if you don't see them with other cards to help play with them. So that's a huge flaw as well. And a lot of times you only are able to put 1 monster on the field in a turn, but if you can establish that well and kind of protect them, it will usually pay off really well. So those are the flaws for the deck. The strengths are that you have a nice toolbox. I mean, you have a negate, something to stop battle phase shenanigans, something to just wreck your opponent in the battle phase, and an extender. So you just have you have a decent little toolbox. You have some nice support cards, with like Turnover Tactics being an insanely powerful card in the right situation. Penalty Box helping you deal with problematic monsters and clear them fairly easily. Powered Jersey allowing you to get over big threats and also just deal a lot of damage, possibly OTK really quickly, which is nice. Like, you have some really, really nice pieces. You have Signing Deal, which turbos you into your main monster or any beat stick you really want. It's really nice. You have the groundwork. I think the groundwork is laid. And I think that's what's important about this video, is that we know that UAs kind of have the basis for building a stronger archetype, something that can be tier 2.5, tier 2 maybe, in the future, which would be so awesome to see, because I think this archetype is so cool. Now, as far as support goes for like what I think Konami could make to really help this deck out, consistency is the biggest problem. Like I said, to help balance out playing so many big monsters, you need to consistently see the smaller monsters to help you make those big monsters not bricks in your hand. So if the deck got a Stratos, that would be huge, absolutely huge. If this deck literally got a monster that said on normal summon, search 1 UA monster or UA card. I mean, UA card would be pretty busted because you literally just search Signing Deal and then literally normal summon, search Signing Deal for midfielder or whatever UA you're in hand, and then you just do a little bit of swappage on there to get the ones you want on board. And that would really help the deck put up like Blockbacker and Perfect Ace on the field at the same time to help interrupt your opponent, which would be really awesome. Other than that, I think I would want to see like 2 different level 4 lore monsters just to really like nail home the fact that like they're just trying to nail home consistency. You need to be able to see midfielder, but if you have 2 more midfielders, God forbid, like versions of midfielder, like level 4 lore monsters that are kind of better than midfielder, that would bump the deck so much. I think the spells and traps are honestly solid. Like, I think the monsters is where you're really missing stuff. I guess you could have like a Rhoda for the deck, like Signing Deal turbos went out, but you don't have a Rhoda, but maybe that would be a little too busted. I don't know, or a little too much, like when you have both combined. But other than the lower level monsters, I really see this deck possibly being able to work with a Link monster, maybe multiple, because we do already see like the offensive and defensive thing where they have the offensive UA monsters and the defensive ones. Maybe they have like 2 to 4 Link 1s. Some of the Link 1s are a little more offensive, some of the Link 2 are like if they're all Link 1s and maybe some of them are offensive, some of them are defensive, that would be really interesting. I don't think that's really the best way to go about it. Maybe if they just got 1 Link 1 that just like was able to search them, like just able to plus them somehow, like, or something, you know, some kind of plus, because the deck needs to be able to put more than 1 monster on the field in a turn, in like one turn one. And that might be the best way to do it, is to just have like a Link 1, like almost like a Magical Musketeer Link monster, where you just link it into him and he either like searches you a UA spell or trap card or just specials a UA straight from the deck. Something like that. And maybe has just like another little protection effect or some like little thing, little nuance effect that's not crazy, but it is nice. That would be really, really cool. there, and a nice, just like really honestly super nice like support card there. If you could play it at 3, that way Extravagance could still be playable in the deck, has a really nice source of draw power. But honestly, consistency is the biggest flaw for this deck by far and away. You have power, you have a semi toolbox, you don't have the best removal, but you can set up disruptions naturally in your deck. You can run through boards with Dreadnought Dunker, you can negate stuff in the battle phase from happening, and you can extend with like Rival Rebounder. You have a ton of that stuff. You have a ton of the stuff you need for a well-rounded archetype. You're just missing the consistency to make sure it works on a consistent basis when you're dueling. So that's pretty much it, guys. That's pretty much my whole 2 cents on the UA archetype as a whole. If you're a fan of this deck, let me know if you disagree with anything or agree with anything here. Like I said, this is just a fun video. I like talking about archetypes I'm interested in, and this is my kind of just whole review of the deck as a whole. So, like I said, give me your feedback. Let me know what you think, and thank you so much for watching, guys. If you want me to do more videos like this in the future, I'm totally down. I really like doing these kinds of videos. I always learn a little bit more about the decks. Like, even though I'm interested in them and played them a little bit, I still learn a little bit more when I do these. So I really enjoy that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I will see you in the next video. Peace on out.